Tatsaviturvaram Rupam Jyotiv Parasya Dhimahi Yannah Satyena Dipayet. We have to conclude, so to say, everybody concluded what he thinks is essential for Indian psychology, and I was very happy to see different contributions. For example, Matthias is more into the studies of consciousness and how things work, per se, ontology of consciousness, so to say. Ajit would bring a perspective of applied psychology and how it works on the vaster scale, and truthfulness of research and not compromising with any scheme of things, which is very valuable contribution. Then Nilce will be representing some kind of psychic attitude to everything, so to say sincerity per se, which would not permit any kind of dealings with mind or any other structure helping, so to say, to create science, because science in itself becomes a dogma and then becomes very heavy burden for everybody to follow. And of course Sunit would bring some dimension of that aspect of bhakti and some kind of unconditional relations with the Supreme, which in itself is very valuable and very different from everything else, and still the same, part of the same movement. So I thought about myself, I'm not speaking about everyone because it will take the whole time, and everyone has a unique approach to this subject. And I was thinking about myself, what would I be representing? And then, of course, there are so many temptations to go in many directions, especially Vedic studies, which is in itself a big subject. And I don't think we even started to look into it yet. We just spoke about it. In IPI we did this exercise for a few years, kind of dwelling on hymns and trying to see what they represent, and we found that they represent much more than we can really perceive. And that was already a hope that we can proceed in the direction of this, so to say, hermeneutics. We will look into the text and try to let it build within our consciousness an interpretation of things. And that was a very interesting also comment by Ajit, that we have to be always fresh and we have to always discover things anew. And I think it is true, but another very good foundation was there, that we always do this on some presumption. And if we have no clarity about our foundations, so then we are roaming in the dark, and we think we have, kind of freedom of inquiry, but we are not free to inquire. We are already determined by our foundations, by our presumptions, by our backgrounds, cultural, language, everything. We cannot think beyond language. So what to say about anything? So from what background we are coming, that would be our thinking. That's why education is so important. This rigorous education, which creates, so to say, a tool for freedom of inquiry. So if we take these presumptions, these foundations as Vedic foundations, then we have something solid. Vedic vision is not determining you in a sense, in the direct sense, giving you, how to say, the answers. It doesn't give you the answers. But it provides something with which you can find the answers. So to say, let me know that, by knowing which I will not know everything. That is the foundation of Vedic knowledge. It doesn't tell you how things are, but it creates in you something with which you can discover everything by yourself. So in that sense, of course, every new approach is welcome. And I will be doing the same, and we are doing the same. We are not really looking into the Vedic text per se, what it says, as Western scholars did. We are looking into it to find the glimpses of knowledge within ourselves. So we are using it as a tool. By the way, rishis used it also as a tool. All these hymns were created for that purpose. And as one rishi says, I created this hymn in the same way as a carpenter creates a chariot. And this chariot will lift me up to the sky. So this was the vehicle of consciousness to rise. So these are vehicles, they are not answers. When we want answers, we are actually blocking our understanding. Because once you have the answer, what can you do with it afterwards? Answer is not the answer. Question is the answer. The presumption, the foundation from which you will investigate into the reality, that's what we have to look into. I'm very glad that you brought this thing, because it really clarified in language what is to be done. And I never could truly be free from this, because in our linguistic course, it's very close to linguistics, we had a special course which is called Presumptions in Text and Syntax. And that was exactly the answer to what you were bringing in. For example, teacher comes to the class and says, Tanya will go to Auroville tomorrow. What does he really say? Does he say that Tanya will go to Auroville tomorrow? What do you gather from this? Teacher comes to the class, you all sit, and first thing he says, Tanya will go to Auroville tomorrow. What meaning do you have from it? The choice for Tanya? Yes, there is altering, yes? What? I didn't hear. Order, command. Okay, not close even. Yeah. Time, yes, it's all what is in the language, but what is not in the language? Do you not hear this? Huh? Punishment, okay. Prediction. Authority. It's all within. Huh? Okay, we are widening the text. Something is to happen in Auroville and she has to be there. But what else you gather from it? Think. She takes it for granted. There will be tomorrow. Yes. Does it?
Teacher reads the thoughts and then says that she is going to do it. She is already planning.
It's a gift. It's this. He is already this. We are the medium. I will tell you directly what he says. In my view, you didn't touch it. He says that somebody else will not go to Auroville tomorrow. That there was a choice, there was a gathering, decision making behind the screen. You gather it automatically. You just didn't widen your scope yet. If you widen the scope of intention, you will see many more things. That presumption is there because the very statement of this kind on the naked space without any context implies that the context was of the discussion, thinking and decision making that somebody else will not go but she will go. There was a preference for her to go. Whatever the reason, punishment, and yeah, there can be many reasons.
But you don't know what is not there. It may be that other people are not going. It may be that Tanya could not have gone.
Right,
Maybe that Tanya could have gone somewhere else.
right.
So you don't know which part is missing.
Right, you don't know, but all of them somehow, in some strange way, are present in this. Now, this is the presumption. If you think about it, when anything is said, for example, in Savitri or Rig Veda, what is being presumed to say that? For example, all is too little that the world can give. Its power and knowledge are the gifts of time and cannot fill the spirit's sacred thirst. What is said? Is it, of course, here it's directly what it says, it is that, presumption and this. But if you look deeper, what Sri Aurobindo wants to create by saying it, yes, it is something vaster than it is being said. So the vehicle of thought, the word, is not what is said. It is only an indicator for some vaster foundation there, which we have to discover, to embody, and to express in our own way, in a new way, always in a new way. If we don't do this in a new way, we are stuck to dogma immediately. Then we are useless. We are again in the same thing as we were before. So it has to be new, fresh word. But the foundation can be the same. The foundation can really, the Veda, that's why that Veda is eternal and infinite, because it gives you possibility to discover reality always anew. It is not interfering and dogmatically determining you that you will not discover anything. Unfortunately, that happened even to the Veda. But not because of its content, but because the content, the very meaning was lost. So only ritualistic form was left because of that. If meaning would be remembered or known, it would not happen. So that's why it's so important to recover that meaning. And we have only keys with Sri Aurobindo. It is he who brought the keys to the Veda. Without his keys, there is nothing for us to do with the Vedic text. There was nobody in India who interpreted it even close to that kind. There is no understanding of the Veda. There is some kind of, it's like, it's a vehicle. It builds within you a possibility to know in a different way. It's the same what you already got from your life, from your lifetime, from your mother's stories in the school. You heard things, read things in the newspapers, you saw how people reacted, so you build up your foundation. Now, as a scientist, you come to the science and say, I will do it, so to say, freely. I'm free to inquire. It's not true. You're not free. You're completely determined but what you carry within yourself, and it is very confused picture of reality, with no answers for anything. Maybe that's the only thing in this freedom of inquiry, that you don't have any answer. You're free to conclude in any direction. But it leads you actually nowhere. Exactly. If you look into this basis, you would agree with this thought, which is very weird, because actually you are denying one particular construction, so to say. You can make many constructions, and all of them will be accepted by the one who has the same foundation. That's what happened to Indian philosophy, all these darshanas. They are contradictory per se in mental stuff, but they do not feel contradictory. For example, if Nayayika will say his paradigm and shows, as we were already seeing, and then some Vyakarana will come afterwards, or some, from yoga school or Sankhya, they go different ways, but they do not feel contradictory. They feel complementary. And in that sense, it's a unique thing. Because of that foundation, Vedic foundation, all different logic systems can coexist. They don't feel contradictory, unless, of course, they will insist on their way. But this never happens in India. Or maybe it happens today, more and more. But before, or at least with the ones who are thinking deeper, this does not happen. And they really value and appreciate everybody's unique system of thought. And that's why India became such a beautiful land, that it could accept any way, any particular different religion. All religions were welcome in India. Why? Because it's a unique way to the divine. Why it could be accepted? There is no country where all religions could be accepted. There is a huge intolerance in Islam or Christianity or Judaism. Jews would never accept other religions as a part of their system, and saying that, okay, you go your way, and it is also, we will tolerate you. But tolerance is another thing, very different from real respect, which is in India. Somebody from Russia was coming here 50 years back, and she wrote in her book, she was surprised somewhere in Kerala, she saw they bring Jesus and so on, because there are many Christians there, and people come out and say Bhagavan and so on. How can you say Bhagavan if it is Jesus? Are you crazy or blind? Don't see who it is? And for them it is the way, it is the Bhagavan in another form, which people believe. This thing is not possible elsewhere. That means there is a deep and profound foundation of some understanding which is already somewhere here. By the way, that's why it is so important to keep India in that dharmic structure and not to allow it to become something against others, because then you break the very foundation, Vedic foundation. Some people don't see it, don't understand, and they go to the extreme, propagating one way as against the other. This should not be done. If they would see the Vedic foundation, they would understand it.
That is tolerated in this country.
Yeah.
Even if you go against that,
Even that.
I have seen in the West or in the South that Ram is sometimes debunked, not as a god but as a devil. It is tolerated by the rest of the people in the country. So they accept it. So that kind of tolerance, for you which is entirely opposite, is accepted as coexist.
Even this, that's why Muslims could come and take India, because even that was tolerated, such a torturing entry into India. Because this was really tough. Those who studied history of India, they know how tough it was for India. And still, of course, some historians say because of Tamasic attitude, because of India was not one and all this. Yes, there are many reasons. I'm not saying that there were no reasons. But still, there is something fundamentally different here in approach. Even that is tolerated.
It's also interesting, like the word Hindu that has been created was created as another religion which is neither Christian nor Muslim nor, and that created a certain identity which then needs to be protected, etc. Whereas before that there was a notion of the Sanatana Dharma, and there was no like dogmatic practice or dogmatic sticking on to a certain religious identity. There were different sects had their own different schools have their own
Sure.
very
There were even fights, wars in the south. There were wars, Shaiva against Vaishnava. We know this even within Shaiva tradition. So it is not like it was completely ideal space where India was, but still there is something there fundamental, and that is Veda. That's why it's so important to look into this, what it really means, what kind of foundation it gives. So this is one topic which I'm fond of. There is the other issue which I wanted to address. It is the integral paradigm, and I think this would be my contribution to this overall forum. What is integral paradigm of knowledge? When I'm kind of attending or listening to presentations on Indian psychology, I can see the possibilities, and then I immediately see impossibility of really following it. And it's interesting, yes? You see, oh, this possibility, and then how could you keep up with it? And there is no strength, no depth, no width enough to really keep it, or hold on to it, or to go on with it. Do you have the same feeling? It's like an opening and then there is no follow-up, some to say. So where is that follow-up? What is lacking that we cannot proceed? By the way, it's not only with Indian psychology. We have here a much better situation than with any other science. You take any humanities science, philosophy or anything. You will insist on your dogma, that's the only way, and make your science against all the rest, and then you make out of it your living. And that would be the end of the story. You become a professor of philosophy of particular kind, of Nyaya, you will be respected, you will publish 20 books, you get your pranam, your cup of tea, and you go. And you change nothing, basically. There was no change of consciousness whatsoever. What is that change? Where we lack something. And I think we lack because we take only one approach to reality. Most essential, most central is psychological, because it is how we see the world, how we identify things personally, yeah? Individually and collectively. But it is not enough. There must be other approaches which have to be incorporated into psychology. If we start seeing these other approaches and how psychology deals with them, such as, for example, aesthetics, psychology of aesthetics, or psychology of art, or psychology of metaphysics, of science, of language, of sociology, history, psychology of social development. Not only psychology as it is, as a pure subject, studies of consciousness, but how that psychology of consciousness is presented, wrong word, applied, wrong word, expressed, embodied into all our activities of our life. So basically what I was thinking, and quite for a long time, and I discovered something very valuable, because in the Vedanta, especially old texts, they were always concentrating on the essentials. They were never giving anything extra. There was no discussion, no kind of, explanation around terms, confusing things. Essentials first of all. So in Taittiriya, the essentials were given by Bhrigu Rishi, that there are 6 major faculties of consciousness. And I already mentioned them before: Annam Pranam, Chakshuk Shrotram, Mano Vacham Iti. It's a pre-Sankhyayic paradigm, and that's why it's interesting for us, because that's exactly what Matthias was presenting with Kena Upanishad. It is these faculties of consciousness, which are directly representing consciousness here. So, and I thought that these faculties must be the key to how consciousness functions. It is not consciousness which is, so to say, naked, without any action. These are the activities of faculties of consciousness. So where do they come from? And I will make a small scheme that will help us to just to see it. So we have, as you remember at the beginning, there was the self. This is the self who alone was, so to say, something, some being, some existence of some kind here. And that self, so to say, projected out of itself, or as Mother says, fell, the light of that, of that consciousness, the power of that, the bliss of that, the life of that, the truth of that fell into its opposite. So we have the periphery, so to say, they fell into their opposites. So all the grades, so to say, from the light to darkness are here. Then when this picture was seen that this happened, there was a command, or there was a decision by the Supreme that the Divine Shakti, Aditi, should precipitate this thing with something which will bring it back, with consciousness. Now, this is the self, Atman. This is all Atman. This is physical Atman, physical body. This is supreme Atman, so to say, self which we want to discover, unborn self, ever present. This is physical one. What is interesting that in the Veda, Atman is also the physical body. It's never afterwards, only in the Veda. In the post-Vedic you will not find Atman as a physical body. So Atman is, because this is the self. It is not only the self there somewhere transcendental, it is here also. It's present now, here, fully. All this physicality, all this physical body is that self, only in this periphery of itself. So once this was precipitated with consciousness, with Purusha, Purusha was sacrificed. The Lord, now we are talking about the self, and that is the difference between the self and the Lord. The Lord or Purusha. Now this is the difference between Purusha and Atman. So it was precipitated, so something entered in. So this is in. Yeah? This Purusha entered in with his faculties. His mouth broke forth, from his mouth fire, speech, from speech fire, and so on. Yeah? His eyes broke forth, from his eyes seeing, from seeing sun was born, from his ears. So all these faculties plunged into this thing, into the self, fallen self, and manifested Purusha, that Purusha, manifested here as individual. But what happened then? If we, these are the faculties, if we turn them towards without as they are turned, yes, then we have the perception of the world as we see it now. All our faculties of consciousness are turned without. We are looking for things, touching, trying to make sense what it means to be. How this self is outside. Or as Upanishads propose, they can be turned also within, to the inner self. And that is something else altogether. So they will discover the self which is unborn, the same faculties. So, and he, as he rightly said, John, that actually there is only one epistemology in this sense, not two, though I spoke about three different. So the studies of consciousness, the studies of faculties, so adhyatma, adhidaiva, and adhibhuta, how we learn about the physical reality. Now why I am saying all this again? Because this is the foundation. From this foundation you can discover everything yourself afterwards. So what Kerner proposes, and Sri Aurobindo confirms, he says that these faculties should not turn anywhere. They have to become consciously passive and to allow that thing, that light, to come to the surface. Since they already separated the self into two, into the outer and the inner, now they have to link it. So if this light comes here, then we will know what it is. What is this self? Through these channels, consciously passive channels as the faculties of consciousness. Sight. Now what happened to these faculties, indriyas, senses, in this sense here, they become senses. These senses somehow started to enjoy their own way of being. For example, we all want to see beautiful things, we all want to have tasty food, nice music, silence. We all want that. That's not we want, actually. There is an enjoyment within these indriyas, senses, faculties. This has to be renounced. And that's what ego sense means, yes? That they are hunting the delight in manifestation. So that has to be renounced, that has to go. That is the ego. Once that goes and they become consciously passive, then the flashes which are coming from the self through them will become more and more constant, more and more frequent, as Sri Aurobindo says, and we will learn more and more about this. And once this light comes to the surface, our purpose is done. Because we are this which was precipitated. We come for this, to bring this light to the periphery here. And this light will change this periphery and will bring it back to its own self-awareness. That's it.
Will there be any role of the periphery itself? So it's true that passivity is demanded.
Not totally passive. He says conscious passivity. Consciously passive. Not passive. Oh, it's a very different thing. Passive, you do nothing. Just you fall into tamas. Consciously passive, it's always waiting, always alert, always aware of the inner light coming through, always welcoming it. It's something altogether different.
The world, it is there. And won't it have any impurity, impurity to distract or change the nature of this consciousness? Does it not have any role to play? Yes, it is true that the self is becoming consciously passive. It's letting itself be. But even if it purifies the senses, what about the world? It is not unreal.
It's coming to it's absolutely real, only it has no consciousness. Yes, the thing is that whether this periphery level doesn't have to have its own, so to say, value, its own status. It seems like all this value and status is here and not here. No, it's not like this. It is the same self, and that is the most important message what I want to give. That the adhibhuta and adhyatma is of the same kind. That is my message. That is the same self. Only when the light of knowledge reaches to it, we will see its value. If light of knowledge does not reach to the adhibhuta level, we will see only partial value. It's a simple thing, but it is really that. So this was the Vedantic yoga.
Outside the periphery,
This is the outside.
This is the outside of it.
There is.
So there is no, so the only way we can move is towards the center.
No, this center will move towards the periphery.
It's the only way, you know, projection
Yeah.
can take place.
Yeah, we as a human beings, we turn either here or there. But what has to happen, we have to become channels. We have to become this, passively conscious channels, which is very difficult. And that's why the question of ego comes up. Because ego is exactly operating here. We are either looking for some happiness within, or we are looking for some happiness without. It is always happening. All these yogis, many of them, are not really looking for the divine manifestation. We are looking for salvation. We are looking for happiness, whether outside or inside. And we deserve it. At least our ego sense tells us this. Our indriyas, they know, because they are representing the Lord, the Purusha. What is the difference between looking for divine and salvation? Salvation is your self matter, so to say. You want to go, to find yourself and to be free from all this burden which was put on you and very unfair, and you disagree with everything. It's a very selfish attitude. I'm bringing something new, yes, so I'm not speaking maybe fair in that sense, but I'm bringing the aspect which is usually not spoken. So it's not an absolute thing, because many people seek mukti maybe with a different mind, but generally speaking, seeking mukti is an escape out of this trouble, out of this fallen self, and that is not our purpose.
Is there no purpose behind seeking the divine?
It depends how. If you want to dissolve yourself in it, and somewhere Sri Aurobindo speaks that why psychic being is not given, so to say, is not soon discovered. And I already figured out, I understood why we cannot become muktas very soon, free. Because once psychic being sees that light, that freedom from all troubles, there is no guarantee that it will stay. It may jump out of it, of the manifestation, because the delight and the greatness of that existence is so greater than what we are here now, today, that what's the reason of being here in this kind of imprisonment? So what is to develop slowly, that the light has to come into this fallen self, because that was the purpose. We came with this Purusha together to bring back the fallen self. By the way, that is the explanation also of the whole Isha Upanishad, the first line. All this is for habitation by the Lord, whatever exists in the universal motion, which I wanted to explain, because that would explain exactly this. Therefore, enjoy yourself with all this, yeah? Being free from it. Tena tyaktena bhunjitha. Enjoy yourself with this renounced. So to say, renounce your claims for every enjoyment of every sense. Once you renounce it, there will be a supreme Lord's enjoyment, because the light will come of an incredible enjoyment, much higher than this egoistic sense enjoyment can give. Ma gridhach, don't grab anything, or don't lust after anything. Kasyas vidhanam, because whose wealth is it? By the way, Shankaracharya gives two translations, and one of those, whose wealth is it? I am taking his, not Sri Aurobindo's now. And the question is really, whose wealth all this self is? Whose? Now Shankaracharya will say it's not yours, that's why you should not touch it. It's Lord's wealth. But then, why you should enjoy all this? How can you enjoy with all this if it is not your wealth? So, and here I had a revelation one day. It just came. It is all your wealth. It is already, all this wealth is yours. It's already granted. But as a lord, not as an Isha, the one who grabs and holds and puts into his pocket and thinks, now I have it. How can you have it? This world is not havable. You really cannot have it. You already have it. It's granted. You don't need to catch and to think that you have it. So this is the message, yes? The message of that freedom of the manifestation of the divine. And the second shloka is even more important. Kurvan neveha karmani jijivishet shatam samaha. And this was never interpreted rightly, unfortunately. Only in Sri Aurobindo's terms he gives finally the light. Doing here verily works. Doing here, that free spirit, Lord within manifestation, doing here verily works, should stay the full cycle of life, should wish to live 100 years. 100 years means full cycle. And thus, and not otherwise, karma does not stick to man. Now, with the consciousness free, when you are engaged in karma, you liberate the whole manifestation. This is an important message. Yes?
You said, just want to go back, you said that the faculties are always desiring for something. And one has to be consciously passive to understand.
No, not to allow that light to come. And it will not come immediately. This is the problem. You become consciously passive, it doesn't come. Then you think, okay, where is my habitual enjoyment for my faculties? I want beauty, I want happiness. Where is my happiness? Peace of happiness. And you go for it again, you fall back for it.
What I was asking is, what if this conscious passivity is also a desire? The faculty is also
Conscious
desire.
passivity, whether it is a desire. Desire. There is, Sri Aurobindo uses this word in Savitri, and by the way, this is a beautiful shift of paradigm, yes? The divine desire. I think we are stuck in the linguistic paradigm, so to say, in the language. Desire, as in the later paradigm, was very undesirable for the yoga. But if you use the desire as a drive, as a wish, as a will to manifest, then it is okay. It depends how you use it, what you really put into it. It's an English word, unfortunately. And we are in the yogic paradigm plus to it. So.
You write that your Purusha is below. How did it use that meaning? Sankhya is only passive. It's not a Lord for us.
In Sankhya, though, it is even being passive, it is when it touches Prakriti, she immediately manifests for his sake. So there is something about it very, so that touch, yeah? So it comes and goes, and because of that, it shows something of that original nature of Purusha, of consciousness. By the way, it's not my definition, it's Sri Aurobindo's definition, that Purusha represents Adhidaiva.
I'm not doubting what you
Yeah.
say. I'm just wondering how the transition happens.
Right, right. And Purusha, this distinction between Atman and Purusha is essential for understanding of all the Vedic and Vedantic understanding. Because we are mixing them. We think that Purusha is the same as Atman. They are the same on this level, only here. But they are not the same on every other level. Ishvara is the Purusha who took the whole Atman already. Ishvara is Purusha who is here on the periphery. Then he is Ishvara. And this, all this Prakriti, so to say, what we call this Prakriti, yeah, becomes this thing for him, because there is no any more distinction. He and Shakti are one and the same. It is his nature. He, as Sri Aurobindo says, takes into his hands the whole nature. Now, who takes into his hands the whole nature? This one, through this consciousness. This is consciousness. Adhidaiva psychology, if you like. Not Indian, but Adhidaiva, about consciousness.
This passive conscious passivity, is that the whole practice of samatha?
Yes, yes, it's a part of it. Samatha is exactly that attitude which has to be found within our indriyas.
The equanimity where there is no seeking nor...
Right. All these words, vairagya, samatha, all of them will be playing that role, how to get out of this thirst for enjoyment within the faculties. Because we don't have any other thirst. There is no thirst by the self. There is thirst by consciousness or its faculties. They want to enjoy. They are used to enjoy because they come from the Lord. They are looking for this enjoyment for food, even in Aitareya. Yes.
I was wondering with this whole notion of passive or desirelessness state of you attaining, is it the essential human nature or the conscious decision people take to be desired or to be passive? Or is it something which is a part of their being?
Can you repeat?
I actually didn't...
Or what I'm trying to say that to be passive, to be passive is a actual state of being of the individual, or this is a conscious decision on his or her part. I was trying to make a distinction between these two. That what is the essential human nature which is conceived in this particular model of framework?
There is a difference between being passive, which is very normal for us to be passive, to rest, to withdraw. We sleep every night, we become passive towards our activities of consciousness, so it works within. And there is this consciously passive thing, which is yogic attitude, which is very different from and very difficult to achieve. And that is the protection against any misuse. Unless you really determined totally to do it, unless you had a glimpse of that what is coming, you will not be able to go for it. Why should you renounce the enjoyment of the life? If you didn't have some greater promise or something which was coming through. So you will, it's a protection. I think it's not for maybe, but the scheme remains the same and cannot be otherwise, because the knowledge, the light, is to come from somewhere. And this is the sacrifice. This is the scheme of the sacrifice. The Purusha was sacrificed. We are all sacrificial beings according to the Veda. We are all here to channel higher consciousness into the lower, so higher consciousness into the lower being, and to change it by that. That's our major preoccupation, and that is our karma. Karma is nothing but constant sacrifice. We think that karma is doing for ourselves, for selfish purposes, because our indriyas are turned outside. So they are seeking enjoyment outside. But truly speaking, if we would see that purpose, I think we would really be able to, some of us, immediately to resign all these useless activities and go for only that. Because it is not about what you do, it's only how you do it. You will do the same thing. You will go to your job, will do the same everyday activities, but you will be doing something else inside. The activities on the periphery will be these, but the consciousness will be channeling different light into it. There will be different perception of it, different enjoyment of it, which is much greater than that what our habitual enjoyment is about.
We'll just understand that if one can become this channel, normally we are used to perceiving the world from inside, from our point of view. But when one becomes like a channel, the inner and outer, then even the world starts speaking to you. The inside of the world then
Yes.
communicates. It's not
Yes.
just my understanding, my light on the world, but the world's light also, then everything becomes a symbol. Everything starts speaking to you about what is the right thing to do.
Right. Yes, I had one more topic which I wanted to contribute, very small thing, but great in elaboration. I will not be able to do it, but I will leave my article for this. It's a 50 pages article on the faculties of consciousness in relation to our activities or in relation to our studies, subjects. It seems that these faculties of seeing, hearing, speaking, thinking, feeling and being in the body, so to say, representatives of Purusha consciousness within this manifestation. And when we speak about consciousness, we have a tendency to say that consciousness by itself is everything. Yeah? It is true only on the adhyatmic level, where the self and consciousness are one. But it is not totally true on the level of manifestation. So there is always something which consciousness perceives or attends to. And that's why there was a question, how come that consciousness apprehends? Yeah? Somebody was asking, I don't understand how it apprehends this. And consciousness is always apprehending. Apprehending what? Taking what into account? The self. Look at this beautiful skin. The self is being perceived by consciousness. They are one and the same on the highest adhyatmic level, but they are not the same on the level of manifestation. Starting from the overmental consciousness, they are not the same. That's why there is a difference between the self and the consciousness perceiving that self. Makes sense? You always perceive something. You always attend to something with your consciousness, whether within or without. But there is always something to come to and to know and to identify with. With what identify? With the self.
Is the self the smallest or the biggest?
Small or big, there is no difference. This is a principle of consciousness, whether it is looking outside or inside.
Specific for the mind. It's specific for the mental level.
Yes. So, in this, what kind of integral structure of knowledge, or so to say, integral paradigm of knowledge we have to pursue to be effective with this Indian psychology? Because one thing is to achieve some kind of level of consciousness, or to realize some deeper sense of yourself, or to enjoy deeper levels of your being with your senses, is okay. But it is all, in my view, it is not reaching to the level where it should come. Even those great achievements, such as even dharana and dhyana and samadhi, these are great steps on the way, and of course we didn't reach them, but I think our purpose is even higher than that. It's not only to prepare the instrument, but also to utilize it for the sake of its manifestation. So in a way, the second shloka of Isha Upanishad, after you are liberated, after you are the Lord, why does it say kurvan neveha, but doing here verily works, thus and not otherwise karma does not stick to man? Why does it say after that when you are already liberated? Because when you are liberated, there is no question anymore of staying. You don't have to stay. You already found yourself, which is free and born. So there is a tendency to leave. But Isha continues, says, you must not leave. It is as if the first shloka already understood as granted, that you are the Lord. It is all your wealth. It's now, why should you stay? You already got this higher consciousness, unborn self, so you definitely will leave. So, but no, doing here verily works. You should wish, only one wish, to stay full cycle of life, and thus, and not otherwise, karma does not stick to man. And it brings me to this mother's experiment when she was completely free on all levels, and she had to struggle till the end to stay in the body and to bring that consciousness down and down into. That is exactly that power which we all have to bring. If there would be more of us of this kind, the whole life, the whole outer life would change. And that is our purpose.
The last part that is said that once you reach that state, you have to will to bring it down and work. Is it a mental exercise? Like that people who have really reached that state, that naturally work. It's not that only it happened at some point in time. Whoever have attained it, like Buddha or any other, once they reach the state, they somehow made themselves as instruments to which that force flows to the end.
Right.
So how do you differentiate between?
No, it's not differentiated. It's the same thing. He speaks about Buddha, who once he achieved that, he somehow didn't leave, but was taking care of his other people who wanted to reach the same level.
But we can speak the same. People have reached and they have made themselves a challenge. It's flowing out.
Right. I'm not yet on that level to distinguish between Buddha's contribution and others, but at this time I see that it is principally the same, because there is no other way out of this manifestation. Actually, even Sri Aurobindo somewhere says, even if you are mukta, even if you liberate yourself and already go there and dissolve yourself, so to say, in that impersonal Brahman, even then he says, I'm not sure that soul will not come back, because the intention was to come down and to do this work. So once you are there and you are freed, somehow you realize that actually you didn't do your job. You didn't finish what you came for. So you escaped. Escape brings not the victory and the crown, says Sri Aurobindo in Savage. It doesn't bring that what we came here for. The crown and victory, victory in the battle with this outer consciousness which resists the change. This is the foundation from which everything else comes into thinking. From here all the paradigms kind of change and flow in a different way. It changes the whole approach to everything we do. But about the integral paradigm, so there were three different things which I mentioned now briefly, and we will have time later, or I will give the article to discuss them. It is first, I was talking about Chaturvarnya, how to become integral in this sense, the four powers of the mother. It's an integrality, yes? And it is very good, well-developed language which can be used by Indian psychology. The other paradigm is these structures of consciousness. Unfortunately, I didn't have time because there is certain difficulty with language here, because Gebser introduces his language and Sri Aurobindo his language. But I wanted you to see this once. These structures of consciousness correspond exactly to these three levels of vital, physical and mental. So starting with physical as magic structure, as oneness of the whole nature, where there is no consciousness separate from nature. Then coming to the mythical, where there is the soul engaged in nature, this adhidaiva within the nature. So there is the nature first without adhidaiva. Then there is the soul which is different from nature, has its own origin and wants to come back to itself in spite of nature. This is mythical structure. And finally there is mental structure, where the whole consciousness is perceived again as nature, but with already inclusive of this as individual objectively existing. So mental structure, rational structure, sees all of us as objectively existing separate individuals. And it's quite interesting that we can perceive ourselves as such. Before we didn't see ourselves as such, according to the mythical. We see ourselves as souls coming here into this environment which is different. And in the magic structure it is all one nature. So mental structure repeats the magic structure. Repeats, but in objective terms. What we see around ourselves is a magic structure. objectivized. All these supermarkets, all these technology, aeroplanes, cell phones, it is magic structure objectivized. Forces of nature working by themselves, it is what it is. It is not relating to our soul. And it is against the mythical structure. It wants to remove it. That's why scientific paradigm is not supporting the mythical. So why I'm saying all this long thing, because these structures correspond exactly to this, what in the Indian psychology was known as karma, bhakti and jnana, 3 levels, or 3 different yogas. Or we have body, heart and mind, or we have physical, vital and mental planes. These are our evolutionary planes developed in evolutionary scale. We all carry them within ourselves, and they are very differently approaching reality. We are mixing them, we do not see them because we are already mental beings. We are rationalizing everything, but they are always influencing our thinking. That is another foundation which is hidden, which is an evolutionary foundation which we carry within ourselves. Now that has to be taken into account also in this integral paradigm. And the last one is this faculties of consciousness, which are 6 major faculties. At least we can start with that and see what else is there. And these faculties, when projected into the approach to reality, create for us the subjects. Psychology is one of those. Psychology is nothing but a psychological approach to reality. I am changing the terms. It's not a psychology as we know it as a subject we are studying. It's an ability of consciousness to approach reality in a particular way, in the subjective psychological way. Philosophy is another subject. It's a twin sister of psychology. And here I will give a brief scheme, just for you to conclude. So we have subjective no subjective. Self-knowledge, self-knowledge can be, so to say, subjective, and so to say, it's very relative, it's just language, objective. That means turned on itself or coming from itself and turned towards the other. So if we have psychology, this here is psychology. Subjective self-knowledge, without which nothing is possible. But what would be the philosophy? How would you define philosophy? It's quite clear there is an empty thing. Objective self-knowledge. That is how we see all selves related in the one bigger picture. We are approaching them as such, so to say. Philosophy. Then there is relational knowledge. So these two are apprehensive because they deal with the self. Either they bring the image of self into itself to know it, or they come out and know the self as such. 2 movements of the same consciousness create 2 different subjects in humanities.
Okay, so probably in India there was just the word darshana, which meant a seeing. It could have been internal, it could have been external.
It's already a philosophy, yes.
There was no split of philosophy and psychology.
There was no split, but darshanas are already more philosophical, though you're absolutely right. And not only for darshanas, for any philosophy. You take Hegel, you take Heidegger, you will be surprised if you read them, they are absolutely psychological. They speak about psychological experiences and try to philosophize them. That's what they do, but they are not calling it psychology. They are not psychologists, they are philosophers. But without psychology, there is no philosophy. There is no way you can philosophize. I already traced this, I looked into this, and I can show you every page there will be psychological treatment of the data. And it is a very surprising thing. So, relational knowledge is more comprehensive That means how things relate. Subjective would be more language, word. I would put word is better, or linguistics I don't want to put. What is word? Word is a self-expression. Expression of your inner self, of your consciousness. It's a vibration of consciousness which comes from the depth of your own. When I speak, where it comes from, this word? Why do I speak the word? Who is that who moves forward the word? By whom it is moved? So there is this self-expression which manifests as the word or speech. Yeah? It can be in many forms, not in verbal forms only. Self-expression can find many expressions. And that's what we call relational knowledge. So to say, I express myself for relation, it is within relation that that knowledge appears, though it comes from within. We will come to art. And then, objective relational knowledge, what it would be? That which holds all the relations within this manifestation, not as selves, not in the mosaics of selves, but in their relations, and deals by relations and defines them by the relations. Through relations, know them. Grammar. Yeah, grammar also, in the terms of linguistics. You're right, this is language. If this is speech, this would be language in terms of language. But it is, I'm widening and I'm going to the essential humanity subject. And that would be sociology and history. By the way, sociology and history, sociology is on the scale of space and history is on the scale of time. Nothing else. There is no difference in that. So there is more dynamic time approach and there is less dynamic sociological, so to say, synchronic and diachronic approaches, so to say, both. So relations, it is through relations we know who is there. Through language we recognize the being, not being directly. Being directly, objectively, is philosophy, to see where the self belongs, what it is per se, as such. Sociology and philosophy are very close, but they have a little different treatment. I would not take more your time, but the last thing, since it was mentioned, there is also manifestation knowledge. Manifestation knowledge is the last one, and it is subjective manifestation knowledge is what we know as art. Subjectively towards manifestation, within manifestation, it becomes something like a culture, art in itself. The whole manifestation is an artistic expression of the self, subjective expression of the self. And there is the last objective manifestation knowledge is science. Knowing objectively it as such. Why I'm giving these subjects, I want to tell you that these faculties of the mind, sight, hearing, word, breathing in and breathing out, which are given in Vedanta, create for us the whole field or the whole approach to reality through our consciousness. That's what I want to say. These humanities, these subjects, are not coming from elsewhere, but from within our consciousness. It is these faculties which determine them as such. And because we are mixing them, always, we are not aware of our instrument. And we are arguing always about these things, because if I speak psychologically, somebody will be arguing philosophically back, saying, no, it is not like that, supermind is on the top. And I was speaking psychologically. I didn't argue philosophically. So you will see that all the argumentation comes from the mixture of these faculties which we are not aware of within our own consciousness. It is only when they are educated and established in a clear relations, then we can finally communicate. By the way, these first four will be samjnana, ajnana, samjnana, prajnana, ajnana, vijnana. These are major faculties, and they are actually in the Vedanta called Brahma Chatushpad, which manifest spirit in matter. It's an absolutely interesting foundation, interesting scheme, which gives us some, to say, so to say, different language to approach these realities. Samjnana, this is psychological major faculty of essential sense, in bringing of the image of things into oneself, knowledge by identity. It is the central part of psychological approach to reality. Prajnana, knowing self as such, in its own relations. Philosophy. Just objectivizing psychology. Nothing else. Objectivizing in a sense that it becomes as such determined by itself. Self-expression, comprehensive knowledge. The power of the self-expressing. The power of the self expressing itself in terms of language or word. Communicating something from within the consciousness. Why comprehensive is for you to think? And sociology is also comprehensive, because it deals with relations, all relations, as one space holding, as one Brahman holds all the manifestation of all the beings. And that is exactly what is embodied in the power of prana and power of annam, matter. It's not important, the scheme is not important, the principle is important. That these outer fields of our studies are not coming from elsewhere, but from within our own faculties, and determined by our faculties. So this is another approach to the integrality, or to the integral paradigm of knowledge. And all of them can be explored and maybe developed into some kind of knowledge. The most interesting, the most profound question, who can define the difference between psychology and philosophy? This is the most attractive food for... I would really dwell on it longer, but most probably we have to stop already, and we will do it in the tea break.